I've never felt such rough roads, and I thought the roads in Australia were bad. And I lived in the centre of Australia where we had dirt roads that were corrugated and everything. But I have to say, the roads in Louisiana are worse.
Do they hit?
They are very bad.
There's a reason why. Sometimes it's not cardio version from our monitors. It's the potholes.
It's the potholes that are doing it. Yeah, just drive on down the road. That'll fix them up, bounce them around a bit.
No, dude, I literally, like, I've had a patient that is screaming in pain, and it was justifiably so. But I'm trying to ask him, like, are you allergic to anything? And so finally he looks at me and he's like, I'm allergic to bees. And he's in obvious pain. So I'm like, cool. I was like, have you ever had any opioids? And he's like, what? And I'm like, I'm going to give you something called fentanyl. And he stops and he's like, I mean, he's crying, but he's like, I don't want that. So then I'm having to explain to him, like, what we have is a small fraction of what you're thinking of. I said, it's not what they sell on the streets. And I'm trying to draw it up. And I'm like, hey, man, like, you're going to feel some kind of way. And then his wife is like, is he going to be addicted? I'm like, guys, please, no. Like, yeah,
we are we have some. We got some. I mean, I have to admit, I had a lady come out to me a month or two ago, straight to my face, and tell me that I am not a doctor. All I was a transport driver.
Cool. Thanks.
And I'm like, okay, all right, yes. Well, I was like, and I just said to her, yes, I was not a doctor. I'm not claiming I'm ever a doctor.
Exactly.
Even though some of them think that because they call us paramedics, we are, and they call us docs. The patient calls us a doc. Listen to the doc.
The doctor said, I'm not a doctor.
I'm looking around. Where's this doctor? There's no doctor here.
Ma'am, I do not have a BMW. I am not a doctor.
Not a doctor, no.
My car is missing its side mirror. Like, trust me.
I've just got a debt to my Australian government for paying for my university course. I am not a doctor. No. But yeah, it's but even in Australia, they sometimes forget what we can do. Although in Australia, they had to bring in the term paramedic a long time. Because in Australia, in 2018, it was when in Australia, paramedics actually became a registered profession, same as nursing and everything. God. Before then, you could have done the first aid certificate and gone and called yourself a paramedic. There was absolutely no set standards in Australia up until 2018. And that took them 10 years. 10 years for all the governments to ratify and come to a consensus on working out. Over 10 years to become a paramedic. But in Queensland, it was really, really funny because I was, as I said, involved in a number of these organisations around. And I actually, in the 90s, volunteered in with the ambulance service, again, unpaid, hopped on an ambulance, rode as a third rider to help them carry their bags. I was a very good fetch and carry boy for them on those calls. But we was when they came in because, it was very much like, you could think back then in the late 80s and early 90s, ambulance officers were much like EMTs over here. They could do so much and, they were starting to do 12 leads and doing all those training and giving drugs and as things are expanding. And, of course, they then started bringing it in as a university degree, but when it first started off, it was you had to be employed by the ambulance. You'd be going off and you'd do a semester of study and then you'd be working on the ambulance and a semester of study and things like that. And those guys that were getting their degrees were called paramedics. So then you'd have ambulance officers and paramedics, and they'd turn up and, some areas in some of the small towns or smaller towns, they might have had two ambulance officers because there was no one there fully trained as a paramedic at that stage. And they would turn up to the scene and the people would be going, no, I don't want you. You're not a paramedic. I want the paramedics. I want to be treated by a paramedic. The ambulance officer got the same levels of skills and everything. It's just a transition periods and everything. So in the end, the government turned around and said, right, you're no longer called ambulance officers. You're all paramedics. And they just renamed all the paramedics. That's how everybody became paramedics, regardless of what level of training. Because then no one would know what level of training you fully had. They would know in the service, and there'd be little marks on their uniform. Yeah. You might have 2 stripes or 1 stripe and different things like that. But no, the general public didn't know the difference. So you're all classed as paramedics. So that's how it came about in Australia originally. In Queensland, where I'm from, they came in as being paramedics. So it was I thought it was quite a novel way of doing it. So that when you turned up on scene, everybody thought they were getting treated by a paramedic. And you might not have been. You might have been by a thing. But I mean, that is some of the differences here is like on a truck, working on a truck. Over here, you get posted to a servo gas station somewhere in the middle of nowhere on the side of the road, something. Where in Queensland, you went back to your stations. And you got meal breaks, which I miss them. I miss being able to come into a station, sit down for half an hour uninterrupted, and be able to eat your meal and not be, oh, geez, we got a call. I'm trying to stuff them. I don't know what people think when we're going past. I'd love to get a reaction from people going past when they see me going past, going to a call, lights and sirens, and here I am stuffing my face.
Dude, 100.
Trying to eat as we're going along, and we're going hardly phased, eating away, going lights and sirens through to off to a call, and then you get there and you're like, oh, I shouldn't have eaten that amount. Because now I feel, maybe I should be on the stretcher next to the patient because I'm not feeling crash.
Get over me, Mom. I'm not feeling too hot either.
But I think some people must give us funny looks as we're going through with that. But I mean, immediately in Australia, at times the crews don't get time to have those breaks either.
Yeah,
I mean, they do get paid on time, overtime rates and different other. They got a little bit more. The working conditions are a little bit more better in Australia than. But again, as I say to people, you can't compare what happens in Australia and how it is in Australia to how it is over here.
Yeah.
I mean, we don't have the population. We got the kangaroo population. We don't have the people population. You've got cities over here with more people than we have in the whole of Australia. So,
which is wild to think about. I mean, it's
like Australia's only got like 26 million people in the whole country, but we can't support more. And that's the thing that people, they look at it. The intense population is all along the coast, like especially on the east coast. It's on the east coast, and everything. When you get west coast, it's a lot more barren, a lot more desolate. A lot more can't support the same amount of people because it's a drier area as well. And then when you start going inland, people got to understand there's a desert in Australia. Like we have the Simpson Desert, and it's a blooming big desert. And people understand Australia is a huge land. Like it is a continent island as one. But I tell people, my home state in Queensland, where I'm from, Texas fits 2.5 times just in that state. When I said I lived in the center of Australia, I lived in a town called Alice Springs. It was a 2-day drive to go from Brisbane, which is on the east coast, to Alice Springs. It was a 2-day drive, and I'm talking driving 11 hours, close to 10 hours each day, kind of thing, to get there. Like I left the second day when we drove back. We left at 5 o'clock in the morning. And we got home at 7:30 that night, and I only ever stopped for fuel. And I was doing roughly around probably close to 80 mile an hour.
How many kilometers is that?
Close to probably around 140 kilometers the whole way. Lucky I didn't see a police officer in my own state of Queensland because I was speeding. Then when I was driving along there was 2 things I was praying for: not to see a copper. Because a police officer, we call them coppers. Coppers. Going shorten. See, we got to shorten everything. Coppers and kangaroos, and the old roos to come and bouncing out, so I didn't hit one of them. If I hit one of them at that speed, they would have ruined my day. Yeah. Well and truly, ruined my vehicle. Even though I had a bull, we call them bull bars in Australia. You might call them push bars over here, but big steel weighted things on the front to push them out of the way. You needed them for the kangaroos and the camels and the bulls and the cattle. Well, when you start getting out in those areas, the stations, and this is what I say to people, they got to understand. Like my nephew worked on a cattle station in Queensland, and it was right in the corner. We call it Cameron's Corner, which is where 3 states kind of meet, and this cattle station was in there. The closest town in Queensland to their state, from their station, was an 8-hour drive away. Oh, God. Okay. The closest town for them to get food and everything was a 6-hour drive, and they hardly left the station when they were doing those drives. Okay. Like, gives you an idea. We measure our cattle stations. They're not measured in hectares or acres or anything. They're in square kilometres. So
fair, yeah.
you know, we're talking big. You know, some of them can be. You know, some of the European countries will fit into some. We got stations bigger than some of the European countries, like France and everything. You know, these stations are huge and they are big. So we you know, that's why they muster cattle with helicopters and everything because yeah, yeah. That's an interesting thing, an interesting job to do, I think. But yeah, they'll muster with helicopters, and they'll go out there and they'll work out. The mustering camps will be like they won't come in for 3 months. They'll be out mustering, you know, just traveling around, traveling on these stations for three months and everything like that. So yeah, it's big. So you know, you sort of so you know, you go out there and you don't have any. The emergency services take a while. Like when I lived in Alice Springs, we were going to a place called Ayers Rock, which is a 6-hour drive away, just to see a rock out of the hill. No, it's a world famous rock. It's actually a really good experience to go and see and everything. And I was fortunate enough before they banned climbing, and I was able to climb it to the top of it. It's not. It looks smooth, this smooth rock, but it's not. It's actually quite dished. Looks like a golf ball on top, actually. But it was an experience, and I feel that I probably because I was able to climb with it. It's got a bit more meaning for it, and I do respect that it's an Aboriginal site. It's important for their heritage as well, and I do agree that we shouldn't be climbing it. But I also feel that I was privileged enough to be able to climb it, that it gave me a bit more sense to connecting with it. So I do understand where they're coming from with their cultural thing. So I do respect them with that, and I do believe we shouldn't be climbing because it was doing damage to it and everything. But at the same token, I wanted to climb it because I felt that it was important for me to do that. So, but it was a long way. I happened to come across a car accident there. Unfortunately, one of the people involved in the accident, she passed away. But it was 2 hours, I think, before emergency services were able to get on scene to that accident. Okay. And they had to fly. They flew a plane close to the closest airstrip that they could land on, which was at a station, which was then an hour's drive for them to get to from the airstrip to where we were and everything like that. So it gives you an idea how remote, like out in the center of Australia, they're going up, it's called the Stuart Highway. You'd be traveling along and all of a sudden you'll see the road will open out to this massive big area that's like 3 to 4 car widths wide, like on both sides and everything. And it turns into emergency runways for the plane, it's called the Flying Doctor Service, which is it's a non-profit organisation. They go out. So the Royal Flying Doctor Service, they do the medical retrieval, they do those sorts of things. But they go out into the remote communities, the Aboriginal communities in the remote areas, and do medical clinic stays out there, giving them, doing health checks for the people, for the residents and everything like that. And then they'll also do a lot of the hospital, like from the rural hospitals, small little hospitals, because the major hospitals are in Brisbane and the bigger towns and everything. They can be 3, 4, 5 hours driving, so they have to be flown in. So they do the flights in. So when I was doing my training, or some of my clinical days on an ambulance, we went out and we brought in. There was 3 patients coming from rural hospitals. One was, I think, had sepsis, and somebody had something needed. I think it was appendicitis surgery and things like that. They had to get flown into the big, because these hospitals don't have those services. Yeah. Some of them don't have any of that. Some of these smaller towns, they will have an RN nurse working a clinic out there, and that's it. Jesus. If they're lucky, they may have a doctor at some of them, some of the smaller hospitals. But those doctors aren't always all general surgeons and everything like that. So it's systems that are worked in, and because as I said to people, people, as I say, over here, they got to understand the width of Australia is pretty well the same size as the width of America. Yeah, going across. So it gives you an idea how large the the place is. So we have these different systems worked out, different, and that's why I say what works in Australia won't always work over here, because you've got totally different situations, places, hospitals. Some hospitals are a lot closer. We don't have the time, so I've medevaced out some patients here, and they'll be there within 5 to 10 minutes of where we were, which was going to be nearly an hour's drive for us. Like in Australia, you're starting sometimes with the helicopter, just an hour's flight for them, just for them to go there. So,
you had kind of mentioned another part that I feel like is a vast difference. The free air service versus like, dude, I on both spans of like flying a patient out. Literally, there was a patient that we could have driven, but he just laying it out. He was plaster drunk, like absolutely toasted. And he ran into the back of this huge, like, concrete truck. His car was mangled. So I'm like, is he stable enough to make the hour and some change drive to the local trauma center? And we're in the middle of nowhere. I was like, maybe right now in this moment, but instead I'm going to give him a down payment on a car, or, granted, to fly out a patient. You're buying a car. It's buying a car. And then, so that's like the flight service, let alone, I've had a patient who, she was having a huge STEMI, and she looked at me, she's like, I can't afford this ambulance bill. And I looked at her, I was like, man, with all due respect, you can't afford not to. And then, morbid, but she ended up having, she started having a stroke on the way to the hospital. We're 5 minutes out. And I'm like, cool, great. Glad you didn't drive. But that's another aspect, is that, like, we have to not convince patients. You never want to convince a patient, but explain to them, like, your life could very well be dependent upon this ambulance bill. And then not to mention your hospital bill, not to mention, like, recently refilling an EpiPen prescription hurt. Yeah. Like, I had to look at, like, do I pick up overtime now? Like,
yes,
ouch.
Yes, and it's very interesting concept, and it took me a while to get my head around with something, and I still don't understand your health insurance over here. I have not got my head around it at all.
What do you mean I have a copay?
But in Australia, we do have a little bit of free healthcare. It's a bit of an interesting system in Australia with it. So we have a quasi free thing, and also it depends on what state. So in Queensland, in our power bill, we pay an emergency service levy. It's part of our power bill, which is paid. And our power bill, we have our power companies that sell the power, but a lot of the company and it's a semi-privatized government. It is a private company. It is owned. Our state government owns the controlling share of that company, and there's other people who invested in it, but they own all the poles and wires and everything like that. So they are in charge of maintaining the infrastructure for the system. The government gets revenue from that, which it's not a bad way to go in a way. They're getting revenue from it. They sell the power to the retail companies, and then we buy it. You can choose whichever retail company you want. So our state government has sets the base price for the power sort of thing to them and everything. So, but they make a huge amount of money off it all too. Yeah. So don't worry, we pay huge power prices in Australia at the moment, but we won't get onto that later. But our health system with that. So how it all works is, because in our tax we pay a GST. So everything that any item that we buy or services, your plumber in, go to the car mechanic, you're paying 10% tax on all of those things. So that goes to our federal government. They divvy it up and give money and some sort of formula to our state governments to run our hospitals, our health departments, and things like that. Plus, we got all our mining royalties. Thank God for mining. Mining royalties coming in, and other taxes and everything. We pay, Australia, we pay a fair amount of taxes as well. So so with our health system, with that, if you are involved in an accident, you're transported by the by the ambulance, because you are a resident of Queensland, you won't get a bill from the ambulance company. It's covered through that. If you're from another state, that's a little bit. Other states, so like Victoria, they have a very similar system where to over here, where you pay for a yearly subscription to belong to the ambulance service, or you have it built into your health insurance and things like that. So they do a little bit there. As I said, in Queensland, we've got it where we're 100% covered because you're a resident, you're paying it in the power bill, you're covered. You go into the emergency department, you won't get billed when you're in the emergency. For whatever they do in the emergency department, you'll be covered. To offset, then if you need to have a knee replacement or a hip replacement or a pacemaker put in, if it's not an emergency health condition, it goes in the public system, you'll go onto a waiting list. Now, it could take 4 or 5 years before you get a knee replaced or a hip replaced or, different things like that. You're on this waiting list. So what the government has done is that they turn around and said, well, you can also take private health insurance out. So with private health insurance, they cover some of those elective things and everything like that. But when you do go into the ER with your private health insurance, they will bill your private health insurance to pay for some. And then if there's any outstanding amounts, it goes to what we call Medicare, which is our government or other thing. If you go to your family doctor and everything like that, you end up do a co-payment there. Mm-hmm. So Medicare won't cover the full cost, but it's much like here and with us, we're paying like $40 or $50 out of pocket expense. Yeah. Where it won't come in is like if you go to a specialist and everything like that, is Medicare might cover a little bit of the specialist, but not the whole amount. That's where if you've got private health insurance, they'll come. So we've sort of got a combination of both now. But again, I don't, and as I say to people, the Australian model probably wouldn't work over here in America because of the population. As I said, you've got such a huge population. Yeah. There's no way you could fund all that. But I think there's got to be something done to a little bit. But we don't have where over in England, where I believe in England it is completely and wholly free. It's all paid. But I mean, as I say, they end up you're going on wait lists for a lot. So in Australia, you could, if you've got, and the government has sort of brought in, trying to encourage young people to take out their private health insurance because I think once you're over the age of 30, if you take, and you've never had private health insurance and you take it out, well, then you've got to pay a little bit higher premiums because you are deemed having more, possibly potentially. Yeah. And the older you are when you first take it out, the more higher percentage premium, extra premium you've got to pay because you potentially have more health problems. So there's that sort of system in place. It's a bit of a quasi, but also again with because our federal government is involved with the Medicare side of things, and because they're involved with the health funds and the hospitals and everything, the government sets prices on what the health insurances are going to get charged for some of the services. So that's where I think could be a thing over here is done, is where over here you can go, hospital A will charge $10,000 for the service. Hospital B might charge $7,000 to the insurance company, or the insurance company says, well, we've done a deal with this hospital, so we're going to pay this, and this hospital we haven't, and that leaves you out of pocket paying huge amounts and everything because no one knows who's charging what and how much. And over here, and our state government sets how much, like the family doctors can charge, what the bill prices are going to be to a point, so that they're not overcharging. So doctors are making money and everything, but like I saw over here, my daughter had to have some vaccinations and everything, and it was going to cost over nearly $1,300 for it all because the insurance said they weren't going to cover it. Now they did, but the insurance, once they said they were paying 100% of it, they were only paying half the amount, so it was only $600 and something. And I was saying to him, well, how come I was going to get charged nearly $1,300? The insurance company for the same service is only going to pay $650 or $700, and that wipes the bill out. And they said, but it's the cost of service. I said, well, your true cost of service is what your insurance company is paying, because you can't tell me that the doctors and everything are going to be losing money with that, because otherwise they wouldn't be in business. They would not be practicing. So I think to try and make things affordable, they need to be able. That's where I think the government can look to control pricing to a point. Now, I know they're saying over here is capitalism and free market and everything, but if you've only got 2 or 3 companies that are doing all the insurances or whatever, you can't tell me they can't conclude and come up with all the prices and everything like that. So that's, I think, is where they could look at trying to reduce some of the health costs, but that's only just my observations from the whole systems. And I'm no expert on it. And as I say, what works in Australia won't work over here, and it's the same as what works over here is not going to work in Australia, because we don't. Again, part of it, you don't have the population or this or that. But I do want to, the difference I see between a lot of it is there are a lot more people are generally have more. If they are sick, they'll have more things wrong with them, 2 or 3 conditions. Where in Australia they're trying to manage it, but again, it's a smaller population to be able to control. We don't have in Australia. Some of the things is they don't have the 50,000 TV channels that you have over here. And still nothing on TV to watch. You have all these channels and nothing to watch. But you have all these channels and everything. In Australia, we've got, I think it's 4 or 5 TV networks. They might have different other channels, but so it's easier to advertise on them to go across. And there's only a certain number of radio stations over here. You've got a gauntlet of radio stations. So again, how in Australia it's a bit easier for the governments to be able to do the advertising. Their advertising dollar goes further with the advertising because it's easier to go out. So it's easier to do the community campaigns, education campaigns, and everything like that. Where over here, because you've got a gauntlet of wags, your advertising money only goes a smaller distance, and you've got to be they have to be very selective of where they use that money on the thing. They can't, like in Australia, it's easy. They can bombard it because they don't have as many to go across. Where over here, you can't do that bombard. So it's harder to get that message out. So people aren't fully informed. That's one of the big difference, and a difference I've seen talking to the people over here. The general public over here aren't probably as medically savvy, understanding medical things. They don't ask the doctors some of the questions. They don't get a lot. Where in Australia, people will ask doctors a lot more. If they don't understand, they will start asking. The information is out there with the community thing. So people have a little bit more medically attuned or understanding than can be over here. And again, I'm not sure about other states in America. This is what I'm finding in Louisiana.
It's pretty worldwide in the United States, nationally.
And again, this is no criticism of between the 2 different places. Right. I mean, as I say, you can't. It's hard to get that message out when you've only got your dollar can only be spent on a smaller number of places. Where over in Australia, you'll get more bang for your dollar comparing it because it's easier to get onto. They don't have all the different. You talk about newspaper. You can put it in print. We've got a handful of different newspapers over here. I've got goodness knows how many newspapers you have going. Like sort of thing, and the communication system. So it's an interesting, when you get into it, looking at it, it can be an interesting way of going, but of the differences. But it's what works. But I would like to see a little bit more. To me, I think the best place they could start is probably doing a little bit more training, educating people in their schools, bringing in health education into the schooling of what things with their body and different things medically, to give those kids those understanding coming through. And when they're going to the doctors as they become adults and everything, and they're starting to get these things, they can ask the questions about the different things. Because I've spoken to a number of, you go to them and you ask them, what do you take this medication for? I don't know. I don't know. Well, has your doctor discussed this with you? Oh, they did discuss some of it, and I didn't understand what they were saying. And I said, well, did you talk to them and get them to try and re-explain it to them? No, I just didn't, because I didn't understand. I didn't,
like, thank you for taking your medications,
yeah,
but like,
absolutely.
why do you take this? Like, what do you mean you don't know why you take your blood thinner? Like, what? Yeah. Okay, so then you narrow down, like, have you had a heart attack? Okay, no. Have you had a stroke? Okay, cool. Now we're getting
now we're understanding, and then and so I sort of see sometimes with it. I see my role in the truck as well is not just providing that acute care to them; it's also talking to them about their health conditions, trying to give them a little bit of knowledge. I'm not going to do it like a doctor does or anything like that.
Not enough time.
But not enough time, no. But trying to give them a little bit and saying to them, look, you need to talk to the doctor or talk to the ER doctor and get them to explain some of this to you in more and find out what's happening so that you can take control. Because, some of these people, you talk to them and they say, do you have diabetes? Yeah, I do have diabetes. I take my metformin and everything. Cool. But have you spoken further with your doctor about getting it control? You check their blood sugar and it's not in it's still elevated, but I mean, Louisiana, everybody's got.
Yes.
I call it Louisiana the heart attack, the diabetes capital of the and especially when their king cakes come out, that's a heart attack waiting to happen on those things.
Not saying it's worth it, but I don't regret it.
I mean, nothing against the king cakes; they are nice and everything, but. Boy, oh boy, when I first moved over here and I had one, I went, holy moly, that was sweet. That heart attack like that happened on that one. So, but I do say their food is nice. They do like their food. But I do find, he's trying to educate them a little bit with their diabetes and things like that. And they think, because they're not understanding that the diabetes can lead to some of these other conditions going on. And this is why you need to manage and you need to look after and do these things, and I do see that this is why when we're going to those patients, I find over here, and this is probably some of the difference because with the way the medical, and you're saying about can't afford the helicopter, the ambulance ride, which I've had patients say that to me as well, and I'm like, cool, and I've gone to getting to them now where, okay, look, you need to go to a hospital. I will take a refusal for you, provided. And I will help you into your family member's vehicle, and I will watch them drive off and going to the hospital, because then I know, okay, you are going to get that help that you need.
Yeah,
I'll accept that as a win because I've managed to convince you to finally go to the hospital. But when we go to them, when they are calling us, they're calling us as a last resort. So now they're very sick.
Yeah.
So when we're going to them, we're getting to these people that are now really quite sick and quite ill, and where in Australia they probably because it's in Queensland and everything, it's free to call them out, to their way of thinking it's free, but they've already paid for it. But, they're calling them out earlier, so they're not as in a chronic condition as when we're getting to them now. Where some of the people are, it does happen in Australia, in Queensland area, where they are. Calling us very late in the stage, but I find over here that at times people are, I've been to people that have, they've had a stroke 24 hours earlier and everything, and now it's that they can't absolutely move any of their one side of their body and everything, and it's like,
and it's hard knowing, like, this is your new normal. Like,
this it's hard. I find it very hard. I mean, in the back of the truck going, well, there's nothing anyone's going to be able to do for you. This is permanent now for you because you've left it so long. And that's what I find. That's the one thing I find over here. So I sort of think that maybe through the schools teaching these kids and everything, and they teach parents. They'll educate home. Or going well, they will. But if they see the signs, then they will call and they will start doing some things early. And again, the person's got to be willing to accept that help as well.
Right. Yeah.
I mean, you can only lead a horse to water. You can't make the bugger drink. So, as we say in Australia, bringing out the bugger. Yep. So, we do have some of those things. So, it is an interesting. I find it interesting. I do find it interesting comparing the two countries, but I try not to compare them and as I say to people when I'm talking to them, you can't compare them because they're two worlds apart.
Yeah.
And everything like that, and like you see it over here. Even over here, you can't compare how Louisiana has to work to say Kansas or as my wife calls it, and that'll upset everyone. Or what is it? Arkansas. We call it Arkansas because I know it'll upset people. Oh look, I love it over here when I see it. There's a place called here. Everybody over here they call it La Place, but it's spelled L-A. It's spelled La Place. So I thought, I got to stir them, so I just call it La Place. And Jesus, when you get a local from La Place, it winds them up quite nicely. Or they call it, what is it, New Orleans? I call it New Orleans.
New Orleans.
And everybody over here is New Orleans. And I'm like, New Orleans. No. And I'm like, this is good. Now I've got something. I can do a bit of Aussie stirring here. We'll wind them up. So, but you can't compare those what happens in one state to another state because what works in one state may not work in another state and everything. And I think some of that comes back again from my age dealing in car parts and working around in different, as I say, in different towns and everything. I worked in one dealership I worked in. We had one dealership in one suburb and another dealership in another suburb. And they were only, a 20-minute drive apart. But one, we would sell different parts. For the same model vehicles, you would be selling different parts in one suburb to what was sold in the other suburb. And you think, same model vehicles are going to be breaking down the same. But no, one area was certain one things, a little bit of climate. One was closer to the salt water than the other area and everything like that. So all those things come into factoring in. You've got your local factors that come into to the situations as well. So and everything. So I find it interesting when you compare, and you can compare to a point, but you can't fully compare.
Yeah, and I'm at a total of 3 EMS agencies I've worked for, and even then, like one of them was in Utah, but like even EMS agencies, from one where I worked at an agency that's like an hour and a half away to like where we work now, like it's 2 completely different agencies, and it's because you're in different areas, you have different medical directors, you have different ways of running things, and there's a podcast I listened to, EMS 2020, that they say when you've worked at one agency, you worked at one agency. Yes. Like it's so different, and it's
yes, and I see that, and that's I'm a big believer with the agencies, with managements and things like that. You need to recruit from outside of your own agency to be able to bring in fresh blood, fresh ideas, other perspectives, and everything. But that's even in general business as well across the board. And again, this has come back from even my own life experiences, working outside of EMS industry in a whole heap of different industries. I was fortunate my parents had their own business growing up, so I grew up in this whole business world type of thing and everything like that. So I see that from that whole perspective. So I sort of find it interesting, again, looking and comparing, and I do that a lot. I find nothing better than go sit at a coffee. You can't hear because you guys don't have cafes over here. I do miss my cafes in Australia, but you have slightly different forms of them and everything over here. But cafes in Australia, you could sit there and you'd have a coffee, and we won't get onto your American coffee to Australian coffees. I don't like your American coffees so much.
What?
Your American? Well, in Australia we have espresso, so everything's all ground fresh, made fresh.
Yeah.
And we put milk, not this creamers. What's with creamers over here, people? Get milk. Milk.
Someone who uses almond milk and creamer,
no.
you use the milk to make it just not as dark, and then use the creamer just for that little bit of taste that you need. It really amps up the game.
But see, in Australia, and that's what I was talking to a coffee guy the other day, and I said, over in America, your coffee is a lot more bitter than Australia. That's what I find. I find it more bitter over here. So you guys are adding the creamers and everything to add that extra flavor. In Australia, we're using the coffee flavor, the coffees, and the way they're dried and roasted and with different other things, and the way they roast them and everything adds the flavor to it. So we're using that, and you're not trying to. So yeah, again, totally. I mean, and also don't get me onto your American chocolate. Your American chocolate. That is. I'm sorry. I have to say, Australia has far superior chocolate to American rubbish.
Not the rubbish.
Yeah, it's not. Look, I wouldn't even cross the road for American chocolate. I'm sorry, and I love chocolate. I absolutely love chocolate. Everybody that I've had given Australian chocolate to over here has gone, and it's great. I love it as an Australian. You give an American some Australian chocolate, like the biscuit, the Tim Tam.
I was about to say, I would drive 6 hours for a Tim Tam.
Tim Tam. You give them an Australian Tim Tam and everything, and you just see their face just relax and go, oh, it's like you're nearly having an orgasm having that. It's like they are like, this is so good, and I'm like, yep. Now you get what I say about Australian chocolate and everything. But I do find, and your names, that was the other thing coming over here, having to learn all these different names of things. Like we, in Australia, your peppers, what you call peppers over here, we call capsicum. Your bell peppers, we call capsicum in Australia. Cantaloupe, we call them rock melons because they look like a rock and they're a melon, so they're a rock melon.
But
yes, cilantro over here is now I've forgotten the name of that one. It's on the tip of my tongue and I can't remember, but it's a different name. Coriander, we call it coriander. Even your meats, your meats are different. Like so, your rump, what we call it rump, I think you call sirloin over here.
Oh,
and your bacon, American bacon is.
Go ahead. What you got, my guy?
Oh, our bacon has the eye in it. So if you think of Canadian bacon, the little eye.
Yeah.
Well, that's there, and then it's got the tip. It's and I've been talking to. Sorry, I was going to say butcher because we call them butchers in Australia. Your meat market guys. Yeah. Okay. Talking to them, the one we go to, and we're getting a good relationship with because I'm trying to convince him to do some Australian bacon, but he says he's struggling at the moment because he can't get the cut. It's cut a different way.
Oh.
So, and again, I'm not because you guys tend to use the belly of the pig for your bacon.
Yeah.
Where in Australia we use a little bit of that, but it's also a bit higher up. So it's a different cut. Now, I'm not saying I prefer Australian bacon. Because it's bigger. One, it's generally
fair.
Yeah, it's a bigger piece of meat. So I got to like Australian in that one, but it's not. It can be as fatty, but it's not as fatty in the sense because the belly fat is quite fatty at times.
Yeah.
And sometimes in the American, you get a piece of bacon over here, and you get it, and it's very small. Very small amount of meat to a lot of fat. So. And that's why I say with it, I don't like American bacon for that because we get a lot more meat.
Mm-hmm.
We will have fat in it in the Australian stuff, but there tends to be a bit more meat in it. Again, different cut. So, you think how many ways can you cut an animal up? But no, we cut obviously Australian. They cut it more maybe like the British way. I'm not quite sure because again, totally different. We're more in line with British over the time. You guys kick the British out and went your own way. So you're going your own way. You're going your own way. I mean, look at the metric system. Like in us, with we've got to when we give a medication, you've got to convert from pounds to kilos because you guys don't want to go to the metric system like the rest of the world.
I will measure by a football field before I use a kilometer.
It's easier. This is I can't.
About 3 kitchen tables lengthwise.
So I had to go when I came over here and I got the measuring tape. I had to get one that's got inches and metric, imperial and metric on it because that way I could go and I could measure my metric. and then I convert that to an inch, but I cannot figure out how to read the bits in between inches. I can go an inch, half inch, and a quarter inch, but anything under that, forget.
I don't know.
I got no idea. You're working in fractions, I suck at fractions.
Same.
And so I could never understand the fraction bits. So go change it to metric. It's much easier for us all. It makes it easier for me. I'm not worried about anybody else. It's for me. But yeah, back onto my chocolate. Yeah, Australian chocolate is so much. But yeah, it's really interesting. The Tim Tam biscuit. Yeah, I recommend people try it if they can. Go find a packet of Australian Tim Tams. Be careful. Some places do sell English Tim Tams from the UK. Not as good. Got to be Australian. Got to say made in Australia. And then go and have a Tim Tam Slammer.
What is?
So Tim Tam Slammer is where you get a Tim Tam biscuit. You bite diagonally at each corner.
The corners, and then you're drinking milk. Wait,
yeah, it's got either a chocolate milk or coffee.
Oh, the coffee would be good.
Yeah, it is nice with coffee. I like coffee, and this is where I say, I have no. This is where coffee comes in. Good. I worked out the way I have my coffee over here is I've got myself a French press, and I've got to do the French press coffee because then it makes it better. But yes, it's But yeah, if you do that, don't you? I've seen on YouTube a person did it with tea, and I'm like, what the hell?
That sounds nasty.
Yeah, to me, it sounds Australian sounds nasty. But yes, you definitely recommend try Tim Tam Slammer with it. But you guys don't have. In Australia we have this chocolate milk flavoring called Milo, and if you're a true,
what do you mean it's not Hershey's?
It's not Hershey's. No. If you're a true blue Australian, and I'm saying about Milo, everybody will know. Because when you have it, you can have it hot or cold, and the idea is, and they say 1 to 2 tablespoons in with your glass of milk. If you're a true blue Australian, 6, 7, 8 tablespoons. I used to have it where I would put, I'd fill the glass up to just about the top of Milo, and just put enough milk in it and make it liquid.
Ooh.
And then I'd eat that.
With the spoon.
With the spoon. You gotta have the spoon. You gotta eat it with the spoon. You can't drink it.
A little bit of crunch with it.
A little bit of crunch. You got it right. And Milo, and the true blue Australian will know what I'm talking about with the Milo part. We're big on this Milo. I used to have it. We'd get this big tins of Milo. A couple kilo tins, and with us and everything. Yeah, it might last a week.
I'm not going to get on a tangent of. I'm not even sorry if I offend anybody. Vegemite is disgusting.
Oh, I agree.
Okay, good. Okay. I don't know.
I have to say, I am not this Australian that loves Vegemite. I hate it. But I will say, I love watching Americans try Vegemite where they get the spoon and they take this great big smear of it.
I tasted it straight when somebody.
No.
It ruined me.
To have Vegemite, and this is the thing: you get your piece of toast, you put your butter on. You've got to see the butter, and so if it's cold toast, you smear it, butter on, and then you smear Vegemite on. And if you cannot see the butter through the Vegemite, it's too thick.
So no one ever explained that.
Yes.
And
because we don't want that to be really known because we love to watch American people try Vegemite and have it and go, this is awful. Dude. And you know where Vegemite comes from, don't you?
No.
It was the beer scrapings out of it when they're making beer.
Oh,
it's all the waste product from making nasty. Beer. For some reason, some Australian decided that it would be great to take this byproduct and then turn it into this product called Vegemite.
It's not great.
No. It's absolutely disgusting.
My cousin brought some over. She went to New Zealand. She brought some over. She's like, try this. And I'm like, what is this? She's like, it's Vegemite. Everybody eats it. Try it. And so I was like, how do I? She's like, just take a nice, squeeze it right into the mouth. I'm like, okay. Yeah, I almost threw up. I have a strong stomach. It made me
maybe I should have given how people should eat it. I've given the secret away, but yes, I hate the stuff and the thing is, what people don't understand, a jar of Vegemite in most little places will last a long 6, 8, 12 months. You don't have a lot. As I said, if you can't see your butter through, it's a very
Mm-mm.
thin smear of Vegemite on your toast or on your rice cracker or whatever. If you do it right, then you'll probably find you might, if you like that, you'll like it. It's salty.
Yeah.
I prefer. There's another one like in Australia it was called Promite, which was made on beef stuff. I preferred that one to Vegemite, but then I like my things a little bit thicker too, so it wasn't as Vegemite. Yeah, I don't like that rubbish.
A little hair on your chest.
Oh yeah, makes your cheeks rosy. Apparently, the old Vegemite song. If you ever listen to that, I don't know the whole song, but and rosy cheeks and something or other, and it was done back in the 50s, and they just kept it all going right through. Got to keep these. If it ain't break, there's no use fixing it. So
fair. So Mr. Peter Eastwick, out of all the things you've learned in EMS, I mean, it hasn't been super long, but I mean, I'd be willing to say I'm coming in on 3.5 years in EMS total. I feel like after about a year, you've learned quite a significant amount, but from your wisdom and experience, what is something, a piece of advice or a tip, trick, whatever it is that you give to somebody going into EMS? We had talked about previously, you had mentioned the thing about don't bring it home. And I will say it's hard, some calls. And everybody says, like, you get people that they're like, I don't know how you do your job. And I look at them like, me either. I don't have a choice. But you have your calls that maybe it's just me. And like, I go to therapy. My therapist is the best. Hit me up if you need a therapist. Patrick is the real MVP. But I've had calls that like months later, I wake up in a cold sweat because it's coming back and things like that. But you had given the piece of after, and I tried it, and it's fantastic. You get off a shift, and hopefully, as you should have somebody that does not work in this job, that you need people that work in this job that you can talk to and run calls through with and whatnot. But you need your support system that does not work in this job, that you can just not necessarily, you don't have to go into nitty-gritty details, but somebody that you can just talk to about, especially if like it's somebody that at your home and things like that. But you mentioned that there was like a specific part of your drive home where you stopped talking about work, and I tried it. I called my fiance and I'm like, hey man, like I have to tell somebody, like I'm so fed up. I'm so frustrated, blah, blah, blah. And I literally, like, I'm halfway through this call and I hit that exit sign. I was like, actually, you know what? I'm done. Like, I'm not talking about it anymore. And it wasn't this thing where usually I would get home, put my stuff down and be like, let me tell you this, and then rant about it. And then I'm trying to go to bed, but my mind is still running. Dude, after that exit sign, I was like, all right, done. Got home, ate a slice of pizza, went to bed. Fantastic. Highly recommend. So,
yeah, so
highly recommend.
that piece of advice was actually given to me by another paramedic in Australia.
It's fantastic.
Queensland on my thing. And I sort of, this job, the big thing that you got to, this job is it will chew you up and spit you out.
Yeah.
You have to look after your mental health. Yeah, and that means both looking after your body as much as you can. Yeah. I can't talk. I need to do
I had
more.
A popcorn on the way here.
Yeah,
I can't say
anything. It is hard in this job.
Eat taquitos for lunch.
Yeah. But trying to look after your body, taking time out to do things away, taking leave from the job, taking annual holidays, however you can. I'd love to see in America more holiday time, a little bit, making sure you've got that, trying to get a good work-life balance, not trying to pick up, and it's hard because you've got to make money, you've got bills to pay and everything, not picking up all the overtime shifts unless you want to, controlling that, taking time out for yourself. Be aware of where you are, listening to things. As I said to you previously, so when I go home, first thing I get to my car, I ring my wife to say I'm leaving, and we have a chat on the way home. That's where we both talk away. She might be at home already and everything, but we'll talk about my day, talk about her day. We'll talk about those things, so that when I get home, when I drive into my garage and I turn my car off, that's the end of now talking about work. I'm at home.
Yeah.
That's how I work. The person I gave me the advice, he said he would drive home. He would be going over his shift and everything. He had a certain sign. Once he got past that sign, he went, right, I've now finished work. I've left work. Now I'm going on to family thing. You do have to, this job, you have to try and be able to split. And
it's hard.
It's hard, but it's again, not only in this job and in this field, but even at my other jobs and my helicopters that I did, my car industry and everything, in those jobs. You have to leave work problems at work. You have to leave home problems at home. Once you can start to learn, which is extremely hard.
Yeah.
And if you can learn to do that 95%, 97% of the time, there are going to be times I've had calls that I've run here. I've gone home. I've not spoken about them, but they have happened. My wife's looked at me and she goes, "We're going to leave you alone and let me decompress." The big thing is also the other thing, if you run bad calls when you're on your job and everything, try and get a debrief. And when I say a debrief, you are able to talk to somebody else. As you said, you have people in our industry we can talk to them about a call. I did this, could I have done that better? It allows the mind to close that call. And if you can close that from what I've been taught, what we've sort of doing some of the subjects at the university, talking to other people, reading about mental health with some of the things like grasses, paramedics and everything and what they're doing. If we can close, our mind wants to close the loops and everything. If we can get closure, then we can handle those situations better. It's hard in our industry because we drop them off at the hospital and we never ever find out about those cases. So we can't always get that full closure. And that's what eats at us. And I know in Australia, they're doing a lot with PTSD because outside of the military in Australia, paramedics and the ambulance services are the number one with PTSD services. It's touched my sister-in-law was a paramedic back in Australia, worked up. She's now had to leave her job, her career as an ambulance in the ambulance, EMS. She's doing something slightly different, but she had to leave because of PTSD and everything. So it's touched us as a family, not me so much because I'm a little bit insulated, but I've seen the effect that had on my brother and everything like that with the number of things. She's getting better slowly and everything. It's a long road. Yeah. But I've seen it. So I understand that, you've got to have those closures. And that means that, you ran a bad call, you had a bad call and everything. Talk to somebody. Don't be afraid to say, "Hey, I'm having trouble." And know yourself. And if you start seeing that you're having that problem and it's starting to ring and your loved ones start telling, then, start reaching out for that assistance. Most ambulance services and everything, they all have these systems in place to help you. I'm pleased to hear that you're going to a therapist with it. Admittedly, for me, I've come into it in later in life, so I've got a little bit more life experience and stuff going on. But I know it affects me at times and everything. But I've got quite a good support with my wife and everything. She understands it, so I can talk to there. I've got my other family in Australia at times. I can talk to them, to my brother in the right setting,
right,
and everything. I have to be careful when I do things with him. And everything because I don't want to trigger my sister-in-law and everything like that. So it's been highly respectful. And as I say, I say to people that I go dealing with the mental health things over here, I always believe that we all at some point in our life, we're all going to face a mental health crisis. It's how we go about handling that mental health crisis and recognizing, if we're able to recognize that we're having that problem and everything like that. And again, it sneaks up. And as I said, with my sister-in-law, she was in with that, and my brother was not. It was switched on with it all, but it caught them a little bit by surprise. Built up to the point. So it's about, and also trying to, while you're in this industry and everything you're doing, it, start planning not an exit strategy, but planning a revolving change to where you want to go with your career. So for myself, I want to get into training. I want to be able to train the new ones coming in. I want to still stay on the truck, but I would like to see in the next, my plan in the next 4 or 5 years is hopefully I'm moving more into the training side than being on a truck.
Mm-hmm.
So, and that's how you start, start working your thing, and everything, and reaching out for that help, and then talking to others. But again, you got to be careful when talking to others in the field or others talking to you about their experiences. That can trigger you and building up. So then you need to have a way to be able to close those loops and different things like that. So, and that's what caught up with my sister-in-law with some of it, and things like that. So, there's things with that you have to look at, and that's the biggest piece of advice I think I can give people is manage your mental health over the long term in this industry, and be aware that it's going to take a toll on you, and have things in place going in of how will you, if this starts coming up, how am I going to handle it? What strategies do I have in place to look at it? And then, as I say, have your and then taking that time out for yourselves, for yourself, listening to music, doing different things, going bushwalking, whatever, go kayaking, fishing. For me, I go. One of my paramedic friends here, him and I go regularly. Although I'm not, because I'm doing some training at the moment, so we haven't been able to go for a while. But we regularly go fishing together. Day out on the water, clears the mind out.
Yeah.
It resets the body. You can escape. We can chat about different things with the different calls, chat about things, and then we reset. And it's what I find relaxing. I've always enjoyed the water. I've always been involved in the surf or different things. So water is my relaxation thing. Also, and other sporting things I've got since I've come over here. I've got into archery, a little bit of archery, and I find that relaxing. I can't own a firearm. So I have to go another way. Because back in Australia, I did a lot of shooting. People think that the gun laws and there's no guns, and we have quite stringent gun laws. Yes, we do, but you can do things. There's different ways around it. It was like working within the laws. It's not impossible to own a gun in Australia and everything, but we won't go down that soapbox over here. But I used to do a lot of shooting over there. So I'm getting into archery over here. My wife and I do that. I do it with her. I try and do things with my wife. That way we're doing things together. And we can relax, talk about things and everything like that. Yeah. So it's about dealing with that stress.
Yeah.
It's a problem across the whole industry worldwide.
Yeah.
With the whole thing. And that's the biggest advice I can tell people.
Well, it's just like this job. Somebody I read a statistic or like some little quick fact, something like that. But it's like the things we see, and again, it's not every single shift, it's not every single call, because that's what my mom is always like. You did a different job, and it's like, Mom, it's not every shift. Like, give me a break. But the things we see are like maybe people will see maybe once in their life. And we're exposed, and not even just that, but just as soon as you log in, as soon as you clock in, you are up for whatever elements may be. And it's the whole point is emergency services. Whatever happens, you're there.
Oh yeah, we see the best, we see the worst of people.
Yeah,
and we see a lot of people. And this is the thing, we see the worst of the person at the worst of the time. When we're getting there, they're having it's an extremely bad day for them because of whatever,
nobody's excited when we show up.
No, they're not. But we do see some funny things, and we have some funny stories and everything like that. And a lot of people find it humorous. And, it comes out with some of our humor that we do have in the industry. It's well known as dark humor. But people have to understand with that is also a coping mechanism for a lot of us in the industry. So we try not to bring it in outside of the close people in the industry with us and everything. And you try not to bring some of that to them and everything. So we do see there's some funny things that do happen in it, and others won't find funny, but because we see it so often, we're finding things funny in little incidences, and it's a way that we have to be able to handle that, that process, that call, and that whole situation. We have to, because we have to look past that worst thing that's happening, and so we have to find those little funny situations that others won't find funny. They won't see that it could be funny, but because we've been on something similar call and we're finding it's amusing, can be amusing to us to see that little nuance difference. But that's a way for us to handle that call. But yeah, so it is with some of that.
It is inevitable that you will ruin one family dinner
because
you made a joke.
Yeah, absolutely.
And you're the only one laughing.
And everyone's looking at you very strangely or going. I mean, as I say, the worst thing you can ask any paramedic or anybody in this field or even nurses and everything, what was the worst thing you've ever seen? We all
paycheck.
My paycheck, yes. Well, truly. But there are some little funny stories that happen on it all, but it is dealing with that, and we have our humor, so people have to understand that we're not. And sometimes if a paramedic or something starts laughing on the scene or at something that's happened, it's not because they are being insensitive,
right?
It's them trying to deal with it. And like one of the subjects I did at university in my first year was actually a psychology subject, and it was all trying to teach us dealing with stress and PTSD, and they were trying to teach us to take the dark humor out of it. But I don't think that will ever happen because it's human nature in a way. But they said that the biggest cause with like PTSD for us and everything is it's vicarious trauma. So it's seeing that, it's not seeing the trauma, it's constantly seeing similar trauma or overexposure and everything. And it slowly builds up in their system that we're seeing it. And sometimes, like I heard, one paramedic I was talking to, he started having trouble. He went on to one call, and then it was 4 years later, he went on a call that was very similar circumstances, but it brought flashbacks to that first call and everything. And then that started him started having problems. And that was that built up trauma from all the other little incidences. And it's not, sometimes the worst calls you go on to seem very minor and trivial, but they flash. It causes us to have those flashbacks or those premonitions back. I've had a few over here, and there's a couple I've had it happen to me personally. I ran a call and gone into something similar, and all I could think back was that previous call. I didn't want to go back down that road. And it didn't. It affected me treating that second patient because I started to go fear, and it made me a little bit slower react, because the fear was overriding everything. And eventually I was able to work through it because I was able to. Again, thankfully, I had really good tutors back at the university and everything. And one of the pieces of advice I always took back from one of them, she's always said that if you get lost on a call and you start having information overload, go back to your very, very start, go right back. Now, in Australia, we call it our primary survey, which is danger response, airway, breathing, circulation. That got drummed into us. So we call it Dr. ABC because it's DRABC. And everything. The funny thing with that is in Australia, in the first aid course, they get trained to do it doctors. So it's DRS, and the S stands for send for help. And we'd all look at it and say, "Oh, damn, we are the help, we are the help. We can't call for anybody."
My first scenario in paramedic school, I literally was like, "I'm going to call for ALS backup." My instructor looked at me, she's like, "Alexis, you are the ALS." I started sweating. I was like, "Oh God, I've made a mistake."
I am the help. Oh no, who do I call?
This poor patient.
So it's like. She's always said, if you get lost and everything, go back to that. And that's what I did on that call. And I really, as I said, I was very fortunate with me. I had really good tutors going through university and everything that passed on some of these little bits of information. And that's where I see it with me, is passing on to other paramedics to be able to help them and pass on. So, but you got to be careful with that vicarious trauma. And that's, came up, and that's what builds up with us. So that's what people have to understand and everything. Sometimes you burst out laughing because something might have been said off the cuff that didn't sound humorous, but to the paramedic, to that person, it then became, it was just an unfortunate human reaction that they started laughing and everything. And it's not laughing at them or at or anybody or anything like that. It's one of the ways that happens sometimes. They have to cope with it. And
dude, it wasn't until I got my paramedic. It wasn't until I had a patient who it was a pretty intense call, whatever. They were still awake. Fortunately, unfortunately, however you want to look at it. But I'm doing all kinds of stuff and I'm humming. I didn't know I hum when I start getting nervous or whatever. And so the patient looked at me and they were like, "Are you humming right now?" And I'm like, "Yes." And they're like, "Is that good? Is that bad? Or what song are you humming?" And I'm like, "I don't know, but just let me do this." It wasn't until after that I realized that when I start getting overwhelmed and yes, the XABCs, Dr. ABCs.
Yeah.
It's that revert, this is how I'm getting through this. Because if not, I will lose it right now. I'm stressed.
So I've tried to bring it a little bit into my practice. If it's not serious, and we get there, and the patient is well and truly talking to us and everything, and it doesn't seem to be serious. I mean, we can relax a little bit.
Yeah.
I'll try and add a joke or two in there just to try and mellow people and have a laugh. Okay, having this accent and coming from Australia over here, it helps a hell of a lot with that. So I can add a little, and as I said, and I'll say to them, if I start having a joke with you and everything, then you know that it's serious, but we're not. If I start going quiet and I start really, then you start knowing, hang on, this is a major thing. We need, and I'm starting to really rapidly churn through the brain cells and everything. And it's a wonder they don't see smoke coming out of my ears or something. But I'm starting to really think, and this person is starting to, we start need the packaging start going or whatever. That person's starting to become serious. So we have to slowly, but if I start having a joke with them, then we know we got time. We can, and just trying to mellow the scene because, these people, they're stressed, they're anxious. They don't know what's going on and everything. We come in and then it makes a more enjoyable experience for everyone.
Oh yeah.
And that's the way I've looked at it. A little bit of humor occasionally doesn't and I find it fun. The greatest one that everybody laughs with is because in Australia, everybody knows we call what you call flip-flops over here. We call thongs in Australia. And notice I said thongs. There's an S on the end, people. That means it's plural. If I happen to say a thong, now we're talking about the other one. If I'm saying thongs, I'm meaning your flip-flops. And of course, if I'm without thinking, I will say to people, make sure you grab your thongs. And they start looking at me, and I'm like, why are you looking at me strange? Especially when you do it to a young 19-year-old girl or something like that, young female in the car who's dressed up in the nines going out and got it on, and and I'm like, I think I probably went really red with that one, but it did. It made them all laugh and they all calmed down because they were all, been involved in an accident. They were quietly emotional and everything, and then they all started laughing and it calmed them all down a little bit and made it quite an interesting.
My favorite I do is I'm about to check people's, and it also helps me gauge on where the patient is at mentally, kind of, because I'll grab my little pen light and I'm like, hey, I'm gonna shine this light in your eyes, just look straight at my nose, and I'll always do it's pretty big, you can't miss it. I mean, I do have a larger nose, but usually that's a good one. It takes the patient out of their circumstance because they're like, it has a big nose, and then sometimes they'll say that. I'll be like, well, that hurt my feelings, thank you. But
see, I always go, I get bright light, and I try. And the other thing I noticed when on IVs, you guys all, I go sharp scratch. And you guys all go a stick or something, a little poke or something. Yeah, I go, it's going to be a sharp scratch. So it's just a little different. And the other one is when you do blood pressures. Because you guys go,
get a little tight.
You guys go, when I'm giving reports to nurses, it took them a while because I'll go, 138 on 74.
Huh?
Yeah. See, there you go. Huh? You guys will go 138 over 74, but it's on because the lower number, because that's the resting rate. So it's 138 on 74. That's an Australian difference. We all said on. On,
okay.
not over. It's not over it. It's on it. So yeah, it's so different. So the nurses over here, they've had to learn, and our dispatchers have had to learn dealing with me. A few little Australian.
Peter's coming in. Here we go.
Here we go. What?
Bring out the dictionary.
What little nugget are we going to get this time? So yeah, it's amusing, especially when I bring in and I start saying damage to cars, because again, some of the terminology is in car. What I've learned in Australia, you guys use different ones over here, and they scratch their head over here, and it's a bit of fun and game. So I have a bit of fun with the nurses over here with them
naturally
with it. So it's fun and games. But yeah, there's a few little nuances differences we have.
Oh, Peter, that's all I got, my guy. Do you have anything else you want to add?
No, just if anybody's interested in this job and they want to do it, give it a go. It is an amazing job. You get a lot of kudos for it, I suppose. In a way, some people kudos, but you get a lot of pleasure out of the job. It's a rewarding job. That's probably what I'm looking at. It's a very rewarding job. There are negatives with it, but there's negatives in every job.
Yes.
And there's stresses in every job and everything, and you just got to learn how to manage all those ones. So, but it is a very rewarding job.
It's like I told my partner the other day, and I feel like I tell it on a consistent basis, but like this job it's weird.
Yeah.
It's unique, quote unquote, air quotes, but dude, it's so weird. Like I told her the other day, like we went through school, we get some certification, we pass some tests, all this stuff. We go through training or whatever with whatever agency you work for, you learn protocols, and then somebody hands you the keys to an ambulance and says, all right, you are now free to turn on these big sirens, big lights, go through intersections, and pick up these people you've never met out of their home and bring them to the hospital.
And pretty well walk into the house. Like we can,
slinging drugs.
And this is the thing, even back in Australia, it was said to us, we're one of the only people that we can go up, knock on the door, and walk into a house uninvited, and no one's going to do it. And fire department to know what. But over here, in Australia, the paramedics, they had the power. They can walk into the house without needing any. Police can't. They need to be invited in or whatever, all different other things.
Yeah.
But yeah, paramedics can. And in Australia, if you've got somebody who's having in a shopping centre that's having a low sugar event and everything like that, and you're sitting around, they could walk in, grab a loaf of bread and some tomatoes, some bananas out of the supermarkets and walk out without paying it and start feeding it to them, and no one would bat an eyelid.
It's such a weird job.
Yep, it is. I mean, I reckon if I was even over here, if I was on duty and I had to do something like that for somebody at that shopping centre and they could see it, they wouldn't even bat an eyelid if I did that, grabbed a banana to start to feed to someone or where they probably wouldn't even bat an eyelid.
Making a PB&J in aisle 9.
yeah, and everything. They would probably go, oh, okay, no worries, and everything, because it is that type of industry where we kind of get a carte blanche that people will accept what we're saying we'll do, and everything, and some of the powers that we can have, even down the mental health road and everything, some of the powers that we can have to tell the police officers and everything is phenomenal that we can do it. And I take it with a lot of respect, and I don't try to abuse that power, because it is a lot of power that we can have. So it is a weird job in that sense that we go and do all this training and everything, and then they'll say, yep, go for it. And you're making these decisions that, and that's what I say with the younger people, it's some of the decisions that we're making and everything is phenomenal and everything. And in some situations, it's people's lives are in our hands, and it's like, yeah, wow. Yeah, it certainly makes things life interesting.
I'm not a huge Marvel fan, but I do carry the quote, with great power comes great responsibility. And I think Spider-Man's a wimp, but I'm just going to leave it at that.
Yeah,
but
and on that, I think that's a good one to not finish on, because absolutely we have that power, but it is and it is a responsibility that we have to use and wield with precision, type of thing, in a way, not abuse it. Yeah, and the industry does have some people that have done it in the past, but that's why we have all the checks and balances.
Yes. But Peter,
Well, it's been a pleasure.
Oh, did I appreciate you on round 2, and we have been recording this whole time. So
well, that's even a bonus. But no, it's been a lot of fun.
Oh yeah,
I've enjoyed it. And anybody that wants to go to Australia, it's an interesting world. But don't think you will see all Australia in one hit in a couple of weeks, because you will not.
No.
It's such a big country.
But I appreciate you. I appreciate what you're doing. You're an awesome medic, and I don't just see it for myself. I hear it from a lot of people. So kudos, my guy.
Thank you.
And yeah, as I end every single episode. So with that.
The 22 at the Lips podcast is designed to support, not replace, the relationship that exists between a practitioner and his or her medical director. The views and opinions expressed in this podcast are those of the host, guest, and not necessarily of Master Medics. The information provided during this podcast is intended for educational and informational purposes only. It is not a substitute for your approved protocols.